Hey Brandon, it's me Zach, and we are back here with another video today. This video, we are going to be going over a deck profile of Ability Reshiram Charizard GX, or I guess AbilityZard for short. This is the deck that toured Rekliv. He brought to the World Championships. He made top 4 with that at that event. And here we have a pretty standard version of the deck. In the following video, we'll be going over your Pikachu Zekrom GX deck versus a similar deck to this. I believe we went over Alexander Weber's list that he made top 8 in at the Cologne Regional Championships. So that's a pretty cool video to watch there. So the goal of this video is to fully explain exactly how AbilityZard works and what you can do against it. So at least you have an idea, if you run against this deck, what are the types of cards that they can play. I don't want to waste too much of your time with this video, so let's jump into it. We have 60 card deck here, and I'll start explaining cards one by one. So Turtonator, pretty low HP single prize card, Pokemon attacker. It's going to be using Explosive Jet, so it can discard any number of fire energy attached to any of the Pokemon in play. It does 50 damage for each card you discarded in this way, so they could have an energy on a Blacephalon, an energy on a Heatran, whatever the energies are on board. They can only do damage in amounts of 50 damage for each fire energy they choose to discard. So considering your deck has Pokemon with 240 HP, that would require them to discard 5 energies, and for a Raichu and a Alolan Raichu GX, it would require them to discard 6. So if your opponent has a lot of energies in play, they can do a lot of damage with Explosive Jet. If they have 0 energies in play, they can always go Welder, attach 2 fires, and attach an energy for their turn to do 150. So keep note of how many energies your opponent has in play if you play against a deck like this, to see how much damage they can do. Next up, they have Blacephalon. So this card is basically used for Fireball Circus. They could quickly Welder 2 fires and attach a fire energy for their turn to be in Fireball Circus mode. You can discard any number of fire energy cards from your hands. It does 50 damage for each card you discarded. So the same numbers as Turtonator, except instead of discarding their energy attached to their Pokemon, they're discarding them out of hands. So Fireball Circus, it needs 5 energies to knock out a Pikachu Zekrom GX, and it needs 6 energies to knock out your Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX. A great way to get around this is by reset stamping your opponent, or making sure that you attack with your tag team Pokemon later on in the game. Now, sometimes you can't control when you're attacking with your tag team Pokemon, but do note that they do have Blacephalon, and it can get a knockout out of seemingly nowhere. Next up, we have Heatran GX. So similar to Turtonator, it takes all the energies from their Pokemon, and they can move them as many or as little as they like with Burning Road, and it goes for Hot Burn GX. The good thing about that, though, is they're going to have all their energies attached to this Heatran GX when they use Hot Burn GX. So again, we're dealing with that 50 damage number. They need 5 energies to knock out a Pikachu Zekrom GX. They need 6 energies to knock out a Raichu and a Alolan Raichu GX. They can also use Steaming Stomp pretty early on in the game by using Welder, attaching 2 fires, and attaching a fire naturally for their turn. They can knock out things like, I don't know, Jirachi. They can knock out Zapdos. They can knock out your Tapu Koko pretty easily. So just be careful about that. So it's one of those things. They're usually going to be using Hopper and GX to deal a lot of damage, but it's one of those things where it's more for the energies that they have in play. If they don't have any energies in play, they can only do upwards of 150 because of Welder for 2 fires and attaching a fire naturally. Reshiram Charizard GX, this is the reason why their deck is named AbilityZard. So you can see that this is one of the bigger attackers that they have in their deck. It has lots of options. Be careful on how much damage you do with your Pokemon against Outrage, because they do more damage depending on how much damage they have attached. So it's one of those situations. If you watch your Pikachu Zekrom deck profile that I made for you, you can see you either want to knock this Pokemon out, or you want to be doing enough so that they're not knocking out your Pikarom or your Raichu and Alolan Raichu back out. Flare Strike, it's a great way for them to knock out a Zorora or a Dedenne. They can't actually knock out a Pikachu Zekrom or a Raichu and Alolan Raichu with that attack, but they can knock out all of your other Pokemon. The big attack that they have here is Double Blaze GX, so they end up attaching 6 energies, which sounds like a lot, but they can go Welder, Fire, Fire, Attach, Welder, Fire, Fire, Attach to get 6 energies as early as turn 2, and swing into a Pikachu Zekrom or a Raichu and a Alolan Raichu for 300 damage. So it's a lot of damage, a lot of HP. So this is a Pokemon you need to worry about. Next up, they got Victini. If they have a lot of fire energies in the discard pile, they do 20 for each. Considering that this version of the list plays 16, they do need to have 12 fire energies in the discard pile to knock out a Pikachu Zekrom GX, and they do need to have 13 fire energies in the discard pile to knock out your Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX. Now, some lists play less than 16 energies, some lists run more than 16 energies. It's basically between 13 and 18 energies that this deck plays, and considering they need to have 2 energies on the Victini Prism Star, it might actually be impossible for them to knock out your Pikarom or your Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX. The number one thing that I could recommend is make sure that you check through your opponent's discard pile to see how much damage they could use with Victini Prism Star. And they also get their energies back into their deck. They use energies for a lot of things, whether it's for having more energies to attach to their Pokemon, to have more energies in hand to attack with Fireball Circus, or to have more energies to bring up Pokemon with 9 Temptations. This deck is all about using energies, so be careful and understand how many energies your opponent has left, or just check it throughout the game when you play against this deck. Next up here we have Volcanion. Volcanions, one of the Pokemon that they use to attack pretty efficiently with High Heat Blast. High Heat Blast for 2 fire energies can knock out a Jirachi. If they have 4 fire energies in play, they can knock out a Zapdos. They could also, if they went second, they could use Flare Starter to power up 3 energies quickly. So it's one of those things where you got to be careful. On the second turn of the game, it's very possible for them to power up with Flare Starter and then next turn attack with Double Blaze GX. It's not really about knocking out the Volcanion. You might want to use your custom catchers to knock out other Pokemon. Next up here, we got Vulpix. Vulpix can be slightly annoying with Tail Whip, but you do have custom catcher to get around that, or you could use Zorora's Thunderclap Zone to retreat for free. When it says the defending Pokemon, it means the Pokemon that the Vulpix attacked. And that's if they successfully got heads with Tail Whip. So if they attack a Pikachu Zekrom GX and they got heads, that Pikachu Zekrom GX can attack no matter what, even if you custom catchered up around the Vulpix. But if you do retreat, or if you play a switch, you are technically a new Pokemon, regardless. So it's one of those things where you want to make sure that you're able to attack if they somehow decide to use Tail Whip. And on the plus side, if they're using Tail Whip, it probably means they don't have too much going on and that you're in a good position anyways. Just keep note of that. Ninetales is basically their version of Custom Catcher in this deck. They use it to bring up your Pokemon by discarding 2 fire energies in their hands. They can always get those energies back with cards like Fire Crystal, or they can get them in the discard pile to do more damage with Victini Prism Star. So you got to be careful with this. Be careful about the Pokemon that you put down on the bench. If your opponent knows what they're doing, they are going to come up with a strategy to knock out your Pokemon. Maybe not even your Pokemon with energies. Maybe they'll just go after your Pokemon that are worth a lot of prize cards. So be careful what you put down on your bench. And if you do have the option to knock out Ninetales, this is one of the few cases where you might want to knock out Ninetales instead of the Pokemon with energy, just because 9 Temptations can bring up whatever Pokemon they like. Moving forward, we got Dedenne GX. This is a card that you should be familiar with. It's a card that you play in your deck too. It has its Dead Change ability. It cannot attack with Static Shock or Tingly Return GX. You don't need to worry about that at all. Dead Change, same thing as your deck. It's going to be used mostly for drawing cards here. They can also discard more fire energies to do more damage with Victini Prism Star's attack. So even if they only have like 8 fire energies in the discard pile, they can always use combinations between Ninetales, Giant Hearth, Heat Factory, Dedenne Change to make sure that they can get more fire energies in the discard pile. So be careful about that. And again, same thing as your deck. You'll see a lot of decks in these videos are very similar because there's a very limited card pool right now. And the best decks are running the best cards. Jirachi, one of the best cards in the game right now. They're using it for Stellar Wish the same way that you are, to search out all of their item cards, all of their trainer cards, their supporter cards, whatever they want to search for that's basically not a Pokemon or an energy, they could easily search for with Jirachi. They do play Switch, they do play a skateboard. This would be a great opportunity for you to shut your opponent out of the game by playing your Lysander Labs. That would shut off their escape board for sure. Cherish Ball, they play a handful of these, 4 of them to be exact, to bring out their GX Pokemon. The Pokemon that they can grab with that would be Heatran, they can grab Reshizard, and they can grab Dedenne. So depending if they want a 2 prize card attacker, a tag team 3 prize card attacker, or if they want to draw some cards, that's what they're going to be using Cherish Ball for. It's one of the cards they can grab off Jirachi right there. Next up, we got Fiery Flint. So if you think your opponent doesn't have enough energies in their hands, they might just have enough energies to use Fireball Circus, or to use Welder, or to do whatever they want. Fiery Flint's going to be there to catch them if they need more fire energies at all, or just to thin cards out of their deck. Make sure, if you're playing against this in tournament, when your opponent searches through with Fiery Flints, that they are grabbing 4 fire energies, or with any search card, make sure that they are searching for the cards that the card says they could search for. And on the other hand, similar to Electromagnetic Radar, you got to discard some cards out of your hands in order to be able to play the card. Fiery Flint allows you to do that as well, so you want to make sure that your opponent actually discarded the cards. On PTCGO, it's automatically going to do it for them, but in real life, you want to make sure that your opponent pays the costs for their cards. Next up, this deck plays a couple copies of Fire Crystals, 2. Other lists can play anywhere between 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on the list or the strategy that they're going for. It's pretty simple. They're just going to be getting some fire energies back from the discard pile in order to be using Welder, in order to attach for their turn, Heat Factory. Maybe they want to get more energies in their hand for Blacephalons, Fireball Circus, whatever they need to do. Fire Crystal can help them out with their energy management there. Friend Ball. So this is a bit of a weird card in the deck, but they can search for a type of Pokemon that you have in play. So in your deck, the only Pokemon that they play that are the same types as the ones that you play are Dedenne, because you play lightning types, and Jirachi, because you play metal type, which is Jirachi in your deck. They can't search out any other Pokemon, but if they're playing against another matchup, let's say another fire type deck like Blacephalon, they could search out any of their fire type Pokemon, or if they have a Naganadel GX, they could search out a Turtonator. Lots of different options with Friend Ball here. It's just very similar to Cherish Ball and to Pokemon Communication. Palpad, this deck only plays Welder as its only supporter, similar to how your deck only runs 2 supporters. Palpad will allow them to shuffle 2 of them back from their discard pile into their deck. So they want to be using Welder, 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 up to 6 Welders in a game. Pokemon Communication, since their deck does not have great search options like yours does in terms of Electromagnetic Radar, they can only search out so many cards. Pokemon Communication allows them to swap a Pokemon with another card, similar to the same Pokemon Communication strategy that you have in your deck. It's just one of the better ways that we have to switch things out in this format. Next up, we got Switch. So similar to how you have Switch in your deck, they can switch out of a Jirachi to get around a Lysander Labs, or if they don't have an escape board, maybe they have a Reshiram Charizard GX in the active position with no energies attached to it. They could switch out of that. Switch is just just switching a Pokemon. It's as simple as the name implies. So it's the exact same card that you run in your deck. I'm sure you know how it works. Here we have Giant Hearth. So once during each player's turn, you may discard a card from their hand. If they do, they can search your deck for 2 fire energy cards. They're going to be searching for fire energies. Now, you might be wondering, why does this card matter to you? Well, maybe you want to discard a lightning energy from your hand to power up to use Tapu Koko's Dance of the Ancients, or you just have cards that you don't think you need in a matchup. Feel free to use Giant Hearth. It will allow you to search through your deck for a card that you want, and you have access to seeing exactly what you have in your prize cards at the cost of discarding a card. Like I said, Dance of the Ancients is the only way that you can make it work, or if you just want to discard a card out of your hand if you're playing something like a Cynthia. Next up, this is a card that you can't use because you don't run any fire energies at all in your deck, but they're just going to be using it to discard a fire energy from their hand and then drawing 3 cards. Drawing cards for your opponent is really good. Feel free to bump this with a Lysander Labs of your own, or by bumping it with your Thunder Mountain Prism Star. It should be noted that this deck plays anywhere between 3 to 4 stadium cards. So it's one of those things where if you play a Thunder Mountain Prism Star first, there's a good chance that they're going to bump it with a stadium of their own. So you might want to use that card after they've used a few stadium cards so it stays in play throughout the entire game. They have Welder here. It's their best way to draw cards. It's their best way to power up Pokemon. Welder is quite often considered the absolute best card in the game. It's played in Blacephalon, it's played in Reshizard, it's played in Welder and Friends. It's played in Mewtwo and Mew. Any deck that can run Fire Energy is definitely going to be running 4 copies of this card. So there's nothing that you could really stop your opponent from playing it, except late game if your opponent has very few cards, at very few prize cards remaining, or if they have a lot of cards in their hands. Feel free to play a reset stamp to shuffle them away. If you think they have a Welder in their hands, they probably do, and you could shuffle it away. They got a couple copies of Escape Board here. The Escape Board is to really get around Jirachi. Stellar Wish, making it a sleep. However, if you were to like paralyze a Reshiram Charizard GX with Tandem Shock, Escape Board would allow them to retreat out of it. So do keep that in mind, that Escape Board can allow them to retreat if they are asleep or paralyzed. Again, it's the same Escape Board that you run in your deck. So something to think about. And then this deck plays 16 Fire Energies. As I was saying earlier, this deck can play anywhere between 13 and 18 Fire Energies, depending on the list that they're running or the text that they're running. So this is going to be to grab out cards with Giant Hearth, discard cards with Heat Factory to use 9 Temptations, power up Welder. Basically, it's a fire deck, so that's how it's going to work. In this matchup, they are going to attack with either Turtonator, Blacephalon, Heatran, or Reshizard, depending on which Pokemon you have out active. Reshizard's great for knocking out GX Pokemon and Tag Team Pokemon with Double Blaze GX. This can knock out a Pokemon out of nowhere, so be careful on how many energies they've played so far. And if they have a lot of energies in play, they're going to be able to use Explosive Jet. Victini can use Infinity in a pinch, so be sure you're checking for the amount of fire energies they have. This deck runs off a Ninetales engine, so they're going to be able to bring up Pokemon however they like with 9 Temptations. So if you have a lot of Pokemon on the bench, they are going to bring up Pokemon on the bench that they want to knock out. Powering the deck is set up between Dedenne, Jirachi, and Welder. So it's a really basic deck, but with it being a basic deck, it also means that it's a very basic list. So this is going to be very similar to every single AbilityZard deck you might run into. Some lists might play 2 Turtonators or 2 Blacephalons. Some lists might not even play Reshiram Charizard GX. Some lists might run more fire energies, less fire energies. But altogether, it's more or less the exact same deck across the board. So if you're playing against it, this is a great way for you to understand what the deck might look like. And then I'll give you a moment to look over the list just so you can understand it. So I'll let you pay attention, look at each individual card as you're watching this video. So if you're seeing all these cards, these are all the cards that they play in their list. You have a decent idea now from looking over the list, and feel free to pause this video if you need a little bit more time. Check it over. This is a very similar deck to what your brother Ryan, he brought to Atlantic City. So if you have any questions about this list, feel free to ask him. Or as always, I'm very excited to answer any question you might have about this deck. If you ran into it on PTCGO, if you ran into it at a tournament, I love helping you out and I love answering your questions. So anything you got more that this video didn't answer for you, or that the following video is going to answer for you, I'd love to help you out there. And speaking about the following video, so we filmed your exact Pikachu Zekrom GX deck versus a very similar AbilityZard deck. Like I said, it's Alexander Weber's list. He made top 8 at the Cologne Regional Championships out in Europe. So it's one of those things where we're taking your tried and true Pikachu Zekrom deck, and we are definitely trying it against one of the best decks available in the game, one of the best lists available in the game, to show you exactly how it goes. A little teaser, I think the matchup might be slightly favored for your deck. Things like Lysander Labs are great at shutting off their escape boards, and Reset Stamp can hurt this deck in a pinch. So that's a great combination to use late game, is Lysander Labs and Reset Stamp. So keep that in mind for when you're watching that video. This is going to be one of the biggest decks, at least until the new set Cosmic Eclipse comes out. And I'm sure you've probably faced against this deck in tournament or online, or even in a testing game with some of your friends or against Ryan. So this is basically where we're at with the list, Brandon. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. And the next video, like I said, we're going to be jumping into a matchup, seeing AbilityZard in action versus your exact Pikachu Zekrom list. So be sure to watch that out. All right, Brandon, thank you for watching, and let's watch the next video. Have a good night.